What's up, guys? This is Nick from Art Studio Poker, and in today's video, I'm going to be continuing the How to Beat Live Low Stakes Poker series with today's topic covering seat selection. So a lot of you guys will already understand the basics of what it takes to, I guess, be good at selecting the right seats or changing seats if necessary. A lot of players don't think about this kind of thing, though, and I think this will be a good reminder. It'll be a good concept for those of you that don't think about this, that don't care about where you sit at the table, or if you like certain spots on the table because you get more room and such. If there's a seat that's, I guess if one of the seats are available around the table that you despise as far as like how much room you have or where you're sitting at the table, but if it's the most profitable seat as far as where you're positioned compared to the other players at the table, then it's going to be important that you try to get that seat. So some stuff to keep in mind when you guys first sit down, whether you do know or don't know your opponents. Let's say you sit down and you know your opponents and it's all the regulars and such, and let's say that your seat you feel like is the most profitable seat and you don't need to acquire a seat change button, then you're probably fine and you don't need to worry about anything that I'm saying here. But a lot of times when you first sit down, it's often not going to be the best seat at the table. And if there is a seat change button available, then ask the dealer right away. Even when you go to sit down, if you see that nobody has a seat change button, try to acquire that, because the table will shift. Players will leave, players will come in. And if you sit down and your seat's the most profitable seat, well, within an hour, your table could just shift dramatically. 5 guys could get up, 5 new guys could come in, and all of a sudden you could have the least profitable seat, like the worst seat, just sitting there. So I would definitely suggest trying to acquire the seat change button. How you should determine where you want to move to, that's really going to depend on players, like as far as skill level, the players around the table, how much better or worse they are than you. And then going down from there, I guess, in less important, but still an important thing to note is playing style, whether your opponents are very loose or very tight. So in general, if you have an opponent at the table that you know is definitely better than you, has a massive skill edge over you post-flop possibly, especially post-flop, then I would try to get on this opponent's left as quickly as possible. You want to have position on this opponent. Even with their massive skill edge, it's still always harder to play poker from out of position, and it'll be easier for you to control the pot against this type of opponent. So I would definitely try to move seats and gain position on any opponent that you feel has a skill edge on you. Now, as far as playing style goes, you generally are going to want the tighter players at the table to your left, and you're going to want the more loose players to your right. It's pretty basic to understand that the loose players will often be putting you in more difficult decisions, putting you in tougher spots than the tighter players often will. That's not always the case, but it is a little more difficult to play against looser guys, and so you often want them on your right. You will want the tight players on your left, just simply the reverse of that. They're often not going to be playing as many hands. They're not going to be putting you in many tough spots, especially if they are tighter ABC players, especially if they are very nitty players. You would love to have one or multiple of them on your immediate left, because then essentially you are the button for 2 to 3 hands, very possibly. I love these kinds of tables where I can get 2 very nitty guys to my left, because then I can pretty much open hands as if I was on the button from the hijack. And the more hands I can play against the lesser skilled opponents that are out of position against me, the more profitable it'll be for me. So I definitely think keep that in mind. Keep the tighter players to your left if you can, or if you can move seats to where you have the tighter players on your left and then you have the more loose players on your right. That'll definitely benefit you. Now, one concept that even some of you intermediate guys or advanced players don't think about possibly, or maybe you don't even know about it, is the concept of absolute position and then relative position. So when you are sitting on a player's immediate left, you have absolute position on that player. You will have position on them pretty much throughout the entire hand until they're the button and you're in the blinds. Relative position is going to be essentially when I guess the main example of it is, let's say you're dealing with an absolute maniac at the table, and maybe he's a good player, maybe he's not, but let's say you just have an absolute loose cannon who's going to be putting you to tough decisions all the time, and he's constantly going to be betting and raising. If you can't get on this player's left, I still think that's probably going to be the best for you, is to be in position on this player. But if you can't be on his left and be in position on him, then the best spot, if you're going to have to be out of position, is actually going to be to his immediate right. And a lot of players think that this sounds crazy or this is wrong. But the reason for this, and this is the term relative position, is often you will gain position on this player in the field due to the fact that everybody else at the table, including the players to his left, are going to act according to what he does. So if you have a maniac that's going nuts and he's playing like every hand and he's the one basically being like the table captain and he's doing all the betting and such, let's say that you're the pre-flop raiser and he flats you, and then let's say two other players flat in position. Post-flop, you can pretty much check almost your entire range on any board texture to him, and this is because he's going to act, and then the other two players to his left are going to have to act according to him. And you know that he's going to be betting at way too high of a frequency. They're going to act. You're going to get to see how strong they are, because in these live low-stakes games, they are probably incorrectly going to let him know where they're at in the hand. They're probably just going to raise him with all their value hands, all their hands that are nuttish, and they're probably just going to flat him otherwise with draws and with weaker top pair, mid pair, stuff like that. So you pretty much get to see exactly where those other two players are at, and you essentially get to act last then by checking and allowing the maniac to go nuts and then seeing where the other two players are at in the range. And you can act then accordingly, whether you decide check call is the best route, whether you decide fold is, or maybe even check raise. So that's relative position, and I hope you guys understood it. I think I gave a pretty good example, so if you need further clarification of that, let me know in the comment section, of course. But yeah, gain the seat change button. Try to have the tighter players on your left. Try to keep the more loose players on your right. As far as dealing with a maniac or a player that is possibly very tough, and if you can't gain position on them, absolute position that is, then try to gain relative position. Sit on his immediate right and allow him to act, and allow yourself to see how the other players at the table react to him. And then you can often get perfect info in these live low stakes games, and then you can proceed from there. So if you guys have questions or comments, like I said, as always, let me know. This is Nick from Arch City Poker. Till next time.